Welcome, everyone. My name is Greg Dunkling. I'll be hosting this evening's session, and thanks for joining us. Special welcome to Prescott Stanton, Director of Brewing Operations at 14 Star Brewery in St. Albans, Vermont. This is our first brew talk and tasting, the next best thing to being in a tap room with friends and drinking great beer. So welcome this evening. My colleague, Nicole Hathaway, hi Nick.
Hi.
Will be handling your questions this evening. If you want to ask Prescott any questions, use the chat area. Post your questions there. Nicole will periodically bring those into our discussion. And if we don't happen to get to all of the questions, look for details from the 14 Star team on Facebook over the next week on their Facebook page. So welcome, Prescott. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how long have you been at 14 Star, and tell us a little bit about the brewery.
I've been at 14 Star for quite a few years now, about 6 or 7 years now. I was the second employee hired. When I started, the brewery had just gone through an expansion from a 1-barrel system, which is what the company was started on, which is about 31 gallons of beer, to a 3.5-barrel system. So I was brought on to assist the previous brewmaster in production, in wort production, in recipe design, in cellaring and packaging, and basically doing all of the production. We worked in that space. It was a small garage at the time. We shared. It was like in a duplex, basically. That we shared. The unit next door was a transmission shop. So that was pretty interesting experience for me, coming from my previous career. From there, we within a year we grew the business. We continued to build 14 Star. And we had to find and build a new facility, which is our current digs now. We're now operating out of a 30-barrel brew house, which is about 10 times the size of the brew house of when I was first brought on the company, and we're just kind of going gangbusters. We've developed the company from only distributing in a small area, like a few select locations around Vermont, to all over the state of Vermont. As well as 6 or 7 other states. So we're getting our reach out there, and people seem to be enjoying the liquid. So.
Well, great. Thanks so much. Shall we begin?
Sure.
With our first beer tonight, we're going to start with
first beer
this
tonight
one.
is Wingman.
All right. So tell us about Wingman.
Well, most
Obviously,
of the beers
we're all enjoying.
Most of the beers we brew here at 14 Star are ales. Wingman is very special because it happens to be a lager. It's a very light, crisp, easy drinking lager. Super bright, very clear. I don't know if you can't really see. Maybe you can. You could read a newspaper through this beer if you'd like, which I'm pretty proud of. It has some nice malt character to it. We brew it all with all German malts, and then we bitter with, with Bravo, and we finish it off with some Czech sauce. So a lot of spicy, a lot of earthy, a lot of noble hop character in this beer.
Scott, if you can hear me, we had a little voice hesitation there.
Oh. Yes. I'm not sure where I dropped out. I was talking about what made up Wingman and how it's special. I guess to restate.
Can you hear me?
Most of the beers. I can hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Uh-oh.
Yeah, there's some hesitation in your presentation due to the audio.
Greg, I can hear him fine.
Okay. All right. Maybe it's just on my end. Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is a really nice beer. It's one of my favorites. We don't brew it very often, like I said, because most of the bulk of our production is in ales, and that's because that's how we built our company. Lagers tend to take a little bit more time, and we just don't have that tank space to dedicate very often to the lagering and conditioning this beer to the level that it needs to be.
Prescott.
Yes, Nicole.
Nicole. I just wanted to. We got a comment here from Walter Judge, and he just wanted to let you know that he thinks that you were the person who let him into the brewery when it was brand new on Congress Street, and he was in St. Albans and stopped in. He said you weren't open, but you were so kind to let him in anyway and showed him around. So he's just saying thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Come back and visit us again sometime. All right.
Any other questions about Wingman? Tell us how the product got its name.
Well, since our brewery is founded by veterans, we've kind of adopted a military theme for a lot of our beers. And Wingman just is kind of fun and playful, and kind of fits within that branding of like kind of having a little bit of a military skew. It also speaks to kind of excuse me. We operate in this company with what we call our 3 pillars. Our first pillar is to brew quality beer. Our second pillar is to give back to the community, and each of our core beers and a lot of our limited edition beers give back to certain charities. And with Wingman, a portion of the proceeds go to help support the Make-A-Wish Foundation. This beer used to be released every year as Beat the Winter Brews, which fully supported the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and we would do a small run for it. This year we decided to rebrand it as Wingman and give a portion of the proceeds that way. That way it fits a little bit more within our branding. It's something we can brew year round if we choose to, and yeah, it kind of plays to that heart a little bit more.
Yeah, 14th Star Brewery has that reputation of being very community oriented, and certainly that focus on folks in the local community, as well as service members who've taken good care of our country over. I remember talking with Steve early on. I think we did a podcast in the first year of our program at the University of Vermont, and he talked a lot about sort of the genesis of the concept for the brewery while he was overseas in the service.
Yeah, they.
So great. Let's. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, elaborate on that
Continue.
thought a little bit. Matt and Steve, our 2 founders, actually wrote the business plan while they were deployed to Afghanistan. They kind of did it as an exercise to kind of keep their minds busy while they were like kind of going through these monotonous days in the hills where, you know, their days vacillated from extreme boredom to extreme danger. So I kind of helped them keep their minds sharp while they were out there. And when they came back and they built that 1-barrel brewery that I was talking about earlier, they exceeded their business plan, their 5-year business plan. They exceeded that within the first year and a half. And so they had to continually expand. So this company grew very, very quickly. And that was, you know, through the support of the community and through the quality beer that we were making from day one.
Yeah, great story. Okay. I hope everyone can keep up with us here. Let's move on to beer number 2.
Sure. Beer number 2 is called Raspberry Vermont.
The only one I couldn't get my hands on, so go ahead. Can't show it.
This is the can.
Don't worry,
We
we
just
got it for you.
we just packaged this recently. This is a fresh release.
Great color.
Yeah. So this beer is bright magenta pink and has a very like pink head to it as well. Um, the base beer of this is called a Berliner Weisse, which is a German soured wheat ale, and it's very tart, but it's very light at the same time. The fruit helps temper that and bring a little bit of sweetness to it, and kind of brings it to another level. And we chose to fruit this beer with raspberries because traditionally, when you would order a Berliner Weisse in Berlin, you could have it sweetened with two different flavors. You would order it red or green. Red would come with a raspberry syrup, and green would come with a woodruff syrup, which is a kind of an earthy herb, which is very tasty. We go with raspberry because that's when we designed this beer. That's what we thought tasted great, and we actually won the bronze at GABF for a specialty Berliner Weisse last year for this beer. It's bright, it's refreshing, it's slightly tart.
How frequently do you expect to brew this beer and have it on the market?
This is a seasonal release. We only do a few batches of this every year. It's usually we have it available between April and August. This year, with current events, we might see a little bit of a hiccup there, but we're hoping that it doesn't affect the production of this beer too much at all.
Mm-hmm.
This is definitely a fan favorite.
Feel free to, ask away, and if you have any questions, if you want to go drill down a bit more on the brewing side, feel free to do so.
People
any questions are fair game.
They're loving the color, and
yeah.
I see Olivia D. It's her favorite.
Oh, we know Olivia.
Yep, people are loving it. Somebody has a question. Catherine Hopkins, what kind of hops are you using to balance this the raspberry?
We use very little hops in this beer. Everything in this beer is locally sourced. We use nugget hops from Homestead, and it's in a very, very small amount, just enough so that we can call it beer. We source all of our grains locally from Peterson Malting. And then we also sour this beer with Greek yogurt from Green Mountain Yogurt. And then we use some local raspberries in this as well. Yeah. Thus its name, Raspberry Vermonter Weisse. We can't call it a Berliner Weisse because that's an appellation and it needs to be brewed in Berlin. Yeah.
Okay, there's a couple more questions.
Sure.
Okay, the Woods family, they have the whole family watching. First time for some of us trying this beer. They're excited about it. Tammy says, at which point do you add your raspberries, and do you boil the fruit first to pasteurize?
No, it's a very small amount of local raspberries that we put in this so that we keep that local aspect to it. We also use some raspberry puree that's already pasteurized, and we add it late in fermentation. We do it at the end, so because the raspberry character is so delicate, we don't want to lose all of that great fruit aroma. And if we added it too early in fermentation, that vigorousness of the fermentation would blow all of those characters out. That being said, adding that fruit adds a lot of extra sugar to the beer, so we want to make sure that that ferments out, especially since we're putting it in a can. We don't want it to continue to ferment while it's in the can and cause a problem later on down the road. So we add it just as fermentation is kind of tapering down. It restarts the fermentation, and we finish it out, so you get this nice dry character to it.
Okay.
We don't boil the fruit.
Sorry.
Answer that.
Okay. Couple more questions. Does the yogurt give it a thicker consistency?
No. We do a process called kettle souring. We temper the yogurt in as we cool the beer down a little bit so that the bacteria is still in place and is able to do its work and provide that acidification step. We don't see any change in the viscosity of the beer because of the yogurt.
All right. And somebody, Christopher Cardona asked, he said, so this is a wheat beer? Question mark.
Yes, there is a high portion of wheat, almost 50% wheat.
All right. And Gary R. said, can you talk more about the souring process?
Sure. This is a kettle sour, so since we are a production brewery and we only do very few sours, we want to make sure that our facility stays very, very clean. We don't want to get infections throughout the brewery. Excuse me. So when we're souring, how the day typically goes is we'll mash this beer, we'll run it off, we will cool the temperature down so that it's at the temperature that the bacteria wants to work at, so that it can create the souring aspect of this beer. We'll monitor the pH levels over multiple days, and when we get it right to where we want it, that's when we'll turn our steam on and kill all of that wild inoculation that's in there, right at the level that we want to see it. From there, we'll add our hops, and then we'll knock the beer out, and it will be treated as a normal ale from then on. That answers your question.
Great, thank you. Walter Judge is asking, he missed your answer to why you add the yogurt.
We add the yogurt because there are strains of bacteria in there that will have an effect upon the beer that gives it the tart, sour character.
Great. All right. Well,
we choose to use yogurt as opposed to like a lad pitch because it's considerably more affordable, and we get a great result from it.
Do you use? This is my question. Do you use like Greek yogurt?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Great. So I'll let Greg continue with questions until we get more questions. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay. Well, let's stop for just a second and let's learn a little bit about your background. How did you get into the beer industry? And understand you grew up in Alaska.
Yeah.
So tell us about your.
I was born and raised in Alaska, and I had stars in my eyes and wanted to go and work in Hollywood. I went to film school for quite a while, and then I worked as a video editor for a film marketing company. I used to make movie trailers and TV ads for the major studios, and that was a blast. I had a really good time doing that. While I was doing that, a friend of mine introduced me to home brewing. And that was always in the back of my mind for the longest time. And we made quite a few beers while I was out in California. And I met a young lady who was from Vermont originally. And we got together and would spend winters back here. And I fell in love with the state, and the beer industry was pretty phenomenal. And, excuse me, I felt my career had kind of run its course out there. The job began to be less fun for me, and I wanted to explore other options. My wife, the woman who I was with is now my wife, also wanted to leave the city, and so we decided that we were going to move to Vermont. And in moving to Vermont, I decided I was going to make a career change. And as soon as I got here, I started looking around and calling breweries and seeing what was going on and who was hiring and who would take even some free work. I fell in with Steve, and we had some good conversations right on, and I met Dan Sartwell, who is the brewmaster here at 14 Star, and we hit it off, and here I am today.
Great, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks.
We continue to get questions about your your current raspberry ice
Sure.
beer. So let's continue
Let's
with
talk about
answering some of those questions. Go ahead, Nick. Yeah.
So Catherine Hopkins just wants to know how much yogurt does it take, and how big is your batch?
Our brew house is 30 barrels, so that's right around 1,000 gallons. And it takes about 12 pounds of yogurt to sour a batch.
Okay.
It's your healthiest beer.
Sure.
Christopher Cardona, he is a retired Navy chief, and he thanks 14 Star Brewing for representing veterans. He's very happy.
Thanks for your service, sir.
And David Rayom also thanked him for his service. Walter Judge says Alaska to Hollywood in St. Albans, Vermont. Wow.
Quite a road.
The Woods family says, could you say again what your position is now?
I do a little bit of everything. I would say my position right now is Director of Brewing Operations. Some people say brewmaster. That seems a little silly to me because I never had any formal training. That title is kind of reserved for those who kind of go deep and train very long and hard in Germany. And I haven't acquired that accreditation, so I would say Director of Brewing Operations is the title.
Great. Gary R. is asking, do you have any formal brew schooling or all home brew experience?
It's primarily on the job experience, with a base in homebrew, and you know, I've reading a lot of books, talking to a lot of people, listening to a lot of podcasts, talking to a lot of brewers who are better than me, and stealing all their secrets.
Good job. Rory just made a comment that says, that's a lot of yogurt. Glenn Cole says, when you kettle sour, are you keeping a blanket of CO2 in the kettle?
Yes. We will push CO2 through actually the bottom of our kettle. We call it bubble up. And so all the CO2 pushes through the liquid and then, until we have a nice blanket on top to kind of insulate so we don't get any unwanted infection.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's keep moving. Let's go to the Maple Breakfast Stout, the next beer. I find this all over the state. It usually occupies the stout tap handle at a lot of bars and restaurants. So congratulations on making this one of your, if not intended, it certainly is one of your most visible beers on the market today.
Thanks. We're pretty proud of this one. This beer started as a homebrew recipe, actually. So previous brewmaster, Dan Sartwell, designed this beer, and we've continued to workshop it throughout the years. I think we've got the recipe pretty close now. This is available both in cans, in this red can, as you can see. It's also available in draft. And then in some really nice places, you can find it available on nitro, which, in my opinion, is the best way to have this beer. Those tiny bubbles give it a nice silky finish and gives it a little bit more body that I always seem to want more of with this beer. So this is an oatmeal stout. We brew this with maple syrup and a blend of cold brew coffee. It's super tasty, chocolatey, roasty. It's very fulfilling, in my opinion. It's super tasty. We'll have people come in to our tasting room who are afraid of dark beers, and we'll have a few-minute conversation with them and find out that they really enjoy coffee. And we serve this to them, and they seem to like think that this is just the bee's knees. They've been converted at that point. They drink dark beer from that point on.
We do have a couple of questions, and I will just comment myself that that was my first dark beer and my first 14th star beer as well, and it's delicious.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, so James Horton is asking, what is the best way to get the maple flavor in the beer?
That's always a tricky thing to do. Since maple syrup is such a simple sugar, most of the maple character doesn't present itself like the kind of syrup and like pancakes kind of character that you're expecting. Since it is such a simple sugar, it ferments out and actually starts to present itself a little bit more as like a little bit more of a woody character. So it's very, very difficult to maintain that.
Okay. Dan H is saying, type of hops used in this beer?
We use Bravo to bitter this beer.
Okay. Christopher Cardona, any chance of getting your beers down here in St. Petersburg, Florida? That's funny. That's where I'm supposed to be right now.
We're working
Nick
on
can
it.
bring some down. Great thing about, go back to you, just can you just tell us again where you distribute beers outside of Vermont?
Sure. We're in Massachusetts, we're in Rhode Island, we're in New York State and New Jersey a little bit, New Hampshire. Is that all of them? I feel like I'm missing someone. I think that's it. And Vermont.
Okay.
What percentage, James is asking, what percentage of oatmeal is in the beer?
You know, I don't know that off the top of my head. It's not a huge amount compared to the rest of the grist.
The questions are flying in on this one. Okay. When in the brewing process do you add the maple syrup and coffee? Matt Courier is asking this question.
Sure. We add the maple syrup to our boil so that it incorporates really nice, and we get a little bit more of a caramelization aspect to it. The cold brew we blend in when we're transferring it to the bright tank, actually. So when the beer is finished and has been fully conditioned, we'll blend the coffee in.
Jim and Tara are wondering, what are the ABVs of your beers?
They range from all over the place. The Raspberry Vermonter Weisse is like 3.2, I think. 3.8 actually, and with the fruit. And then this stout is 6.5. And then our double IPA is 8%.
Okay. Rory is wondering if there's any chance of getting your beer in Texas.
You know, we're working on getting all over the country. We're trying to maintain our quality as best as possible. So it will, at some point, I hope we'll be in Texas, but we'll see.
Gary R is asking, do you use sap or syrup?
In Maple Breakfast Stout, we use syrup. We do one beer on our pilot system every year. It's brewed with sap instead of water. It's called Naked Maple. And with that pilot batch, it's only available in our tap room. We try to figure out every single way we can get some aspect of maple into the beer. So we use sap instead of water. We put syrup in the boil, and then a portion of the malts we actually smoke over maple wood.
Thank you. Yeah. People are asking about what to pair this with. So I do see like some suggestions, but maybe you have some suggestions on what to pair.
You know, this beer is pretty good with a lot of stuff. I think one of the best pairings I've had was a pulled pork sandwich and some cornbread.
Ah,
The smokiness of the pork played with the sweetness in this beer so nicely, and that dry roast hit with that the hit against the sweetness in the pulled pork, like they just kind of counterbalanced each other and built into something just special. It was pretty epic.
great suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah.
James is asking, are you using 2-row for a base malt or another base malt for the stout?
2-row.
Okay. Okay, I think people are still looking for where to find this. So they're wondering how far south you go.
They want you to open up in North Carolina so you can
Right.
distribute in the South.
Yeah.
Get it a little further out there. People really want this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I think we should continue on a little bit.
sure.
Let's
Yep. Okay, so let's go to the last beer of the evening, which is Dive Bomb Hazy Pale Ale. Tell us
Sure.
about it.
Dive Bomb
And I'm going to open mine right now.
Great. Me too. Dive Bomb is part of our limited batch series. So we don't brew. This isn't part of our core set. This beer was born out of, we had some extra, we needed to brew a batch of our recruit, our golden ale, and we had a little bit too much on hand, and so we had two fermenters of this beer in progress, and since we didn't need about 15 barrels of it, we decided, hey, let's try and dry hop this beer and see what happens. We went through a few iterations, and we landed on this version with Equinaut and Mosaic, and it's pretty tasty. It's bright, it's citrus forward, it has a little bit of a pineapple character, it has some really nice firm bitterness. It's a very solid IPA, and I mean, this is my daily drinker right now. I've been crushing quite a bit of this stuff.
Yeah, these are my two favorite hops as well.
Yeah, and so the name Dive Bomb kind of comes from, it's a lower ABV beer but a higher hop beer. You can have a few of them and not hurt yourself, and yeah. Cheers.
Very nice.
I think people are still asking a little bit about the maple.
Sure.
Maybe they didn't see the answer before. What's the ABV of the maple?
6.5.
Okay. And how do you account to the additional? Oh, sorry. Questions are coming in, and I lose the other question. How do you account for the additional sugars from the maple syrup with your estimating the ABV?
We've got a pretty good handle on it. We work with maple a lot here, and we kind of, I know the syrup does fluctuate from time to time, but our sugar supplier is pretty solid, and we kind of know what to expect from him. And if we have to, we'll make adjustments in our grist bill, but it's pretty consistent with what we get from him. So we don't have to make too much adjustments.
James Horton is wondering if you will start a brewery in Virginia.
You can see we have a national audience here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yes. Let's see. Catherine Hopkins. She's tempted to head north. I told her to come on up and visit. Yeah. Let's see. Dan H., any oats used in this beer? Dive Bomb.
No.
Okay.
A little bit of wheat, but no oats.
What hops are used in Dive Bomb?
We bitter this with some noble hops, and we finish it with, we dry hop it with Equinaut and Mosaic.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, the Woods family is saying one of us is picking up lavender flavors. Lavender flavors. Where does that come from? Oh,
That's
hi,
probably
Greg.
one of the hops. I would say most likely Equinaut.
Rory is asking, does your brewery collaborate with others at this point?
Yeah, of course. We do collaborations all the time. We're part of the Vermont Brewers Association, and that association has 2 festivals every year. The summer festival on the waterfront, excuse me, and unfortunately we had to cancel the winter festival this year, which is held at the Killington Resort. Um, and, and that festival has kind of a theme, and that theme is collaboration. And basically every beer at that festival is a collaboration beer. Our whole lineup every year we don't bring any of our own beers. We only serve beers that we've made with other breweries. So yes, we do collaborate quite frequently.
So Christopher Cardona is saying, we are stuck using pellet hops here in Florida. In your opinion, how much flavor aroma loss is encouraged by using hops versus fresh?
Well, I can't really speak to that on a scientific level, but I don't think there's any issue with using pellet hops. I think you're going to see, as long as your hops are stored correctly and you're not using old pellets, you're going to see a much more consistent product with a pelletized hop than with a fresh hop. With the way the hop suppliers are handling those lots and those crops, I would say that the pellet hop is a superior hop because of that.
Great, thank you. James is asking, what type of yeast are you using for Dive Bomb?
It's an American ale yeast.
Okay. And James is asking, are you using pellets or cryo hops?
Pellets. We have experimented with a newer product called Incognito, and we've played around with that a little bit. It's kind of a concentrated whirlpool product. It's designed to increase yields. It's like a kind of like a concentrated syrup that you can add instead of adding a bunch of vegetal matter to your whirlpool, so that you're still getting the oils and those volatiles in your beer and not have the loss from the absorption. You're supposed to be able to see a lot higher yields that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The Woods family wants to know if you're giving away free beer for people having trouble staying home for so long. Ha ha.
Aha! I wish we could.
Which actually takes me to a question about your tap room. Obviously, all breweries are suffering from the fact that people can't come and hang out and drink beer in tap rooms. But you have certain days of the week where you sell curbside. Can you give us sort of information about that?
Yeah. So Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, well, actually starting Wednesday night, we turn our service on. We are operating through an online portal called BeerMe, BIERMI, and it's basically an online store that you can order, you can set up, you can build cases, you can buy. We just lifted our case limit, so you can buy down to 4-packs, up to kegs of beer right now, right from our tap room. So you put your order in. As long as you're 21, you can set everything up, and you come and you know, you set up a pickup time, and you come in and you drive up. We bring the beer out to you, and yeah, that's kind of it. So Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, from 3 to 7 on Thursday and Friday, 4 to 7 on Saturdays now. Our partners in our kitchen, Grazers, have started their service up today, so they're offering food to go separately. But you know, we work in tandem with them. So if you want a nice burger and a brew, you know where to come.
Worked out well for me today. Thank you.
Nice. Yeah, I remember when she came to pick it up.
Yeah. Did you deliver it to her curbside?
I did, yes.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Rory has a question about your R&D, experimental brews, and what's in the works.
What's in the works? Well, right now we're kind of focusing on our cores. That's kind of what we're seeing is keeping things going. Since our R&D is typically takes place within our tap room, and since our tap room is closed, a lot of that is conceptualized right now. We're not brewing a whole lot of stuff we're not brewing anything on our pilot system currently because we only serve our pilot system in draft, and since that's not an option for us right now, we've had to kind of put a pause on that program.
So Nick takes Matt's question about coffee IPA.
Well, there's a couple of questions. So Tammy also has a question about, do you typically use liquid or dry yeast? And in either case, do you repitch?
We typically use dry yeast. Our yeast program has kind of been in development for quite some time. We were repitching for most of our batches there for a little while. With this current situation, we've had to kind of step back and dry pitch, unfortunately, just because of the pauses in the schedule. It just we haven't been able to repitch.
Thank you.
Sure.
So Matt Sarson has a question. He said it's not one of the 4 on the list, but can you talk a bit about your coffee IPA?
Sure, coffee IPA. That's one of my recipes. So I'm happy to discuss that. We designed that beer when we were working with our cold brew supplier, Northern Bayou. We've been going back and forth of like, let's make a hoppy coffee beer, and so it was a lot of fun. We got to develop stuff. He was sourcing these crazy beans from all over the world, and we were, you know, doing all of this R&D, which is just code for drinking, and finding out which flavors of coffee, which fruit, because there's a lot of fruit flavors in coffee, go nicely with the hops that we had selected for this IPA. And we found that Galaxy hops, which we dry hop the coffee IPA with, worked really, really nicely with this Ethiopian bean from this very specific region. And because it had like these crazy blueberry characters in it, and it was so tasty. Yeah, and so that beer was informed by our process and our practice with Maple Breakfast Stout. We kind of treated it the same way. We made a really solid IPA, and then we blended some cold brew coffee with it as it was finishing, and came up with coffee IPA.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dan H has a question. What's the best advice you would give to a home brewer looking to eventually open their own brewery?
Wow, that's a $1 million question, isn't it?
We didn't plug that one.
I would say, yeah, plan. Make sure you have a solid plan in place. And then once you have that plan in place, make another plan. Be ready to constantly reevaluate and reprioritize, because that's basically the nature of brewing. You're going to constantly be making adjustments.
Good advice. Good advice.
That might be nothing but a bunch of BS, but there it is.
Sounds good.
Sure.
The Woods family's asking, have you ever used a Pico brewing system? Any thoughts on how it works?
I can't say that I'm familiar with that system.
Okay. Gary R. is asking, why did you decide to revamp Tribute? He's not the only one asking about that.
We haven't revamped Tribute. I'm a little concerned now. Can you elaborate on revamped?
I don't know. Maybe Gary R. Well, actually, Walter said, did Tribute get revamped? Okay, so I guess that was just a question about deciding to revamp Tribute. Okay, Gary R. is saying your first rendition of the beer is completely different than the taste now.
Well, that's truly the nature of craft beer. Brewers aren't going to sit still. We're going to constantly tinker, and we're going to constantly develop until we've created the beer that we think is good. And we're our own worst critics. We're never happy with what's in our glass. We're constantly trying to make it better. So yes, the Tribute has evolved from its first batches to what it is now. We've got things pretty well, like with all that talk about tinkering and developing and evolving. We've got it dialed in pretty good now, I think, and I think it's a lot better beer for that. Sorry if you disagree.
The Woods family is saying, do you know anyone who has experimented with brewing cannabis flower into beer for the flavor? And Gary says that Long Trail has.
Yeah, I do know that there are a few Vermont breweries that have experimented with what's called CBD oil, I believe is what's the available product. As far as using the flower itself, I don't know very many people who have utilized that now. It's such a tricky ingredient to use, and if you're not labeling things properly, and if you're using the wrong thing, you get in trouble. Like there's a lot of red tape around it, and it's kind of a risky area to be in, or at least it was the last time I heard. So it's not something that we're super interested in right now. So we really haven't done a whole lot of exploration with that ingredient.
I think some of the most of the experimentation, not all, but most of it is in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
There's a brewery, I think, in the Toronto area. That's
they're a little more relaxed there, aren't they?
Yeah, generally speaking.
I think that's well, questions are still coming in, but that's it for the moment.
We may pick up some additional questions on Facebook afterwards, but I'd like to sort of bring our session to a close this evening. And this was our first Brew Talk and tasting, and I really appreciate all of you joining us for this. And you have no worries about driving home afterwards, so that's a good thing.
Stay safe.
This is a difficult time for small businesses of all sorts, and big businesses too, for that matter. There's a nationwide push for support of local breweries by the Brewers Association, and many state and local initiatives as well. You probably have seen some of these. The Vermont Brewers Association, for example, is started a series of virtual events with breweries across the state. So check out their website for upcoming dates and topics. And we hope you continue to support and show your love for local breweries by purchasing beer, certainly at their at their tap room, curbside purchase, as well as at your local beverage stores. I know that they all really appreciate your support at this time. Vermont, of course, has always had incredible craft beer fans, and some neighboring states, executive directors have said to me, we wish we had the loyalty of your beer drinking fans that you have here in Vermont. And I'm sure that's continuing now from what I hear in terms of support for local breweries. So let's all do our part to keep that up. And in closing, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Thanks, Nick, for facilitating all these great questions. And finally, thanks to you, Prescott, and 14 Star Brewery for launching this first session.
Hey, thanks for having us. We're happy to be here, and
Sure enough.
and this is great. This is a good time.
Nick, want to say anything for closures?
I appreciate everybody's questions, and thank you, Prescott, for all the great knowledge, and thank you for the awesome beer. This is amazing.
Thanks.
All right. Well, everyone have a good rest of your night, and cheers. Cheers for now.
Cheers.
Take care.
Cheers. Stay safe.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.